So in my experience for myself as a musician and also as a piano tutor here at the Conservatoire for a number of years now, really the central premise for me was the idea of taking our music making from the practice room to the stage and what we do to bridge that gap. So we spend most of our lives practicing, and we spend a smaller proportion of that time actually performing. And when we're students, when we're training, that's something we really need to work on, because it's a different mindset when we're performing, really. So as I said, in my own experience, and then observing what happens with my students. So with my students, we can spend all year working on their repertoire and really polishing what they're doing, getting it to a really high standard. And then I witness them going onto stage and performing. And I can see for a proportion of students, this is something that we really need. This is a challenge for them. And I'm not seeing their full potential realised on the stage, whereas I can see it, if you like, behind the scenes in the practice room, in the teaching room. So that was my first fundamental reason for developing this programme, because having knowledge now of the Intelligent Behaviour Analytics, the IBA programme, I realised that that deep sense of self-understanding, that knowledge of who we are, why we are as we are, how we differ from other people, what lens they see the world through, that actually that knowledge has huge benefits in many areas of our lives and permeates all sorts of different aspects of our lives. And I had the hope and the belief that self-understanding would help musicians really reach their potential. So this area, as I'm talking about, of maximising our ability on stage, there is a lot of research now, and there's a lot of work going on in this area of performance anxiety. And there are performance coaches, just as there are in the world of sports. Now in music, this area is developing. So there are a number of techniques out there for people to help them train in this. So having knowledge of those techniques myself, I think it's great. You know, I'm really behind this. And the more we speak about it, the more musicians talk about it, the more we realise this affects many of us, okay? But the one issue I had was that trying these techniques is quite a long process for some people. And there's a lot of hit and miss, of trial and error. And not only is the time that it takes to try different techniques and what works for somebody and what doesn't work for somebody, what can happen with some people is that they're left wondering, why does this technique not work for me? Why does it work for somebody else? What's wrong with me? Why is this not improving? And in some cases, this can actually exacerbate the problem. So starting this programme, the inspiration behind it was the belief that self-understanding at the depth we would be going into would fast-track this process, because it would enable students to see why this technique is likely to have a greater probability of working for them. So it would cut out some of the time taken to try this technique that has a less chance of probability of working for you. And also, crucially, gives them the why that's going to work for them. So as I said, that was the central inspiration behind the programme. Wider issues also fed into it. So the issue generally of health and well-being for musicians. As I said, it's a rigorous training students at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire are going through. We are musicians long before we come to a conservatoire. We have spent many years performing, entering competitions, practicing many hours a day, having intensive lessons. And the rigours of the training can take their toll. So that's one extra aspect I wanted to look at. Another aspect that's vitally important, if I talk about bridging the gap between being a student and a professional out there in the world as a musician, is developing a strong sense of your own unique voice as a musician, if you like. And that takes time to develop, and the confidence to be able to go out there on stage, to receive the feedback that we do, So as students, we're all the time receiving feedback. We have performance classes, we have our own individual lessons, our peers may give us feedback. A lot of the time this isn't 100% positive. We have to deal also with the negative feedback. If we go and perform a concert, we might get a review. Again, we come up against this issue. So confidence in that area was vastly important. So those are really the main inspirations behind starting this programme, at which point I come to you, Adam. I don't know if you'd like to say a few words about what interested you in taking part in this programme and developing it.
I think for me it was very much when you first approached me, because I already knew you had a very in-depth understanding of the actual IBA framework, and when you came in and you explained your whole rationale for that, the way I was looking at it was from the point of view, it's been developed, it's been used in a whole series of areas. It's been used within the NHS to help staff, it's been used within the business community, it's been used within the military in little areas, in little pockets. It's been used within the police in pockets and so on. So it's been used in a variety of areas. But what we would never have the opportunity to do is to actually work with an expert from that field and take that knowledge and entwine it together, and then to release something that actually brought in the specialism of the field that we were looking at. And so I think that for me was the most exciting thing, because we were sitting with something that we knew worked. All the results we were seeing, the framework, if I said in a top line, is there to increase confidence and resilience. And this is a constant that it does. It's suddenly creating sustainability for that human being. It's enabling a person to recognise their individuality, that they are one of 7.8 billion people. They are not just a label. They are not just a type. They are unique. And then what we found was, for me, it was actually trying to say, would we see the same results that we get from where we teach this at MSc level on an MSc 20 credit level 7 module? Were we going to get the same results? That to me was the exciting part. Well, the programme was run by taking an MSc module that we currently run in the Faculty of Health, Education and Life Sciences, and we took the programme itself and we drew out the key components, just the key components, which was focused around the self-understanding element and understanding others. So we took that, we then got together, as we know, we entwined it all together, and we developed these 6 days, these six classrooms. And this was to do a pilot program over 2 or 3 years so that we could gather data, see how effective it is. And so in the first year, which was in 2019 when we did it, it ran out, it went well, 6 classrooms, and at the very end, we were looking for students to perform in a mini concert. And then we could actually evaluate how effective it was for them on their confidence in performance. And the idea was, were we going to replicate what we were seeing with the results from the MSc? Then COVID came in the way. That then stopped how quickly we could do the second stage of the pilot programme. So we decided that we would run it anyway online. Then rules changed in the UK and we were able to do it also in the classroom. And so the second stage of the pilot went online and in the classroom. We never did a concert at the end. That was the only thing they missed out on the second group, because that we were prevented from with COVID. And then we pulled in all of your work.
So yes, it's been quite exciting for me developing this programme, particularly over the two-year pilot programme that we initially agreed to, because we've worked with small to moderate group size, which has been ideal. We've been able to design and tailor it specifically alongside student feedback and to what we felt the group particularly needed. So as you said, we had 6 sessions for each of our 2 pilot programmes that we've run, and we've covered an array of content really, and I've been, you know, hugely gratified with the response from students. And we start, obviously, students are not quite sure what they've signed up to, and they've applied to join our programme. They've been given an overview of what we were aiming to achieve. And the first thing they do is to answer the detailed questionnaire, and then they receive their individual bespoke report. And they go away and read that. And then we start our classrooms, and we really then bring this to life and expand upon their own individual report. So we've covered the self-understanding element, the understanding others, the whole basis really of the IBA framework. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about the Indian proverb we've used to help people balance their life really.
So the whole IBA framework actually sits on Eastern and Western thinking. So it's got quite a lot of substance in the way it's built, but it's actually sitting on an Indian proverb that was written many thousands of years ago. And it basically takes the view that everybody lives in 4 rooms. We all live in 4 rooms. We have a physical room, a mental room, an emotional room, and a spiritual room. And if we can actually access these rooms, even if just for a moment through the day, it can help us to become a whole person, and it can make us more effective. And what we found when we drew that kind of ancient thinking into modern thinking as well and merge it all together, that's how we were able to build that, and that's how we saw the confidence and resilient element take place and become real.
So yes, so we've walked our students through looking at how their life is balanced in the 4 rooms concept there. And it was interesting for me, the more we looked at the 4 rooms concept, to draw parallels in musicians' life as well. So we found that we can use those 4 rooms in our life as a musician, and we took students through their practice in terms of the 4 rooms. So asking them, in their time in practice, do you inhabit those 4 rooms? The mental, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. And it was interesting to find, I can think of a number of students, that was quite a revelatory experience for them to analyse their practice and realise most of their time was spent in the physical and the mental room. And not enough time in their practice was answering the question of, why are you playing? What are you trying to express? What are you trying to say? That fundamental questions of being an artist really, and that communication. So that was a nice topic to cover with them. We've looked at aspects of why they're unique. We've looked at aspects of how to make decision making effectively. We've obviously gone into quite a lot of detail of different performance anxiety techniques. We did that more towards the end, middle and the end of the programme, when they had solid self-understanding. And it's at this point that we start to see jigsaw pieces falling into place and moments of light bulbs going on for students.
There were lots of light bulb moments there, weren't there, at that point, as we moved into those classrooms.
Absolutely.
Do you remember as well, we got quite a few quite animated responses from people, and there were some interesting reactions as they were just falling into place with it. Yeah, those are good memories, actually.
That's the benefit of the small to medium group that we were able to run. And students actually reported back, they enjoyed the fact that, because this has been open to any year group within the conservatoire, any instrument, any discipline, that they met people and they shared ideas with people they wouldn't have normally spent time with. They weren't on the same course, they weren't learning the same instrument, for example.
That's right, because we had BMUS, we had Bachelor of Music, didn't we? And we had
Masters, we had
Masters
students
well.
on our most advanced postgraduate diploma as well, and we had all instruments as well taking part. So the collaboration, not only between you and I in developing the programme, but the input for the students, the sharing of ideas, created a wonderful environment, really, to tackle these topics, to be open to discuss them and to find ways forward. And it's been, there's been challenges of COVID, and this year our second pilot programme looked at some of those issues to do with COVID, and we've had that opportunity. It was great. It was great for us to do it online, to not be stopped by COVID, if you like, because we had students at that point as well that aren't in Birmingham. We've had students that are still overseas, still being able to take part. And then when we were able to come back into the building and to do classrooms, we had the best of both worlds, really.
We did, yeah.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, so true.
Some of the standout outcomes for me, because there's been so many, as this programme is based on the individual, I'd say to truly get a flavour of the outcomes, it's on the individual level, and each participant in the programme has had important but yet different outcomes, I suppose. And I think that's one of the huge beauties of this programme, is that ability to help people on that personal level. But to give you a top line on some of the outcomes, one of the standout outcomes for me, bearing in mind we gather feedback, we're sending them a questionnaire at the end of the programme, and we are getting written feedback from students. So one student actually said that they are forever changed as a performer on stage, having taken part in this programme. Another student said it's one of, if not the most important packages of knowledge that they have gained during their education. So those two quotes for me particularly stand out.
They were quite dynamite, weren't they?
Yeah. And hugely gratifying, really. But to also see what students have put into this programme, the investment, not only their time, but their thoughts, their sharing of ideas, and their engagement in the different techniques, in the ideas we're putting forward to them. Because bearing in mind, this is quite a different programme to anything they have experienced before. This is a programme they are voluntarily applying to join. Yeah. This is not part of their degree. This is not resulting in an assessment at the end of it. And we've had that feedback that it's quite different to the academic classes that they take, or their performance classes within their performance department. So we've seen wonderful outcomes. To look at that first challenge that I mentioned at the beginning of taking our music making from the practice room to the stage. So a lot of students have used some of the techniques. They've been guided in their choice of which ones to try out, and they've actually used them for their final recitals. And yes, they're on a journey of trying them out, but already we are seeing great success for some of them. And it's great to see the different techniques they took on board and tried out. Switches in mindset. So musicians are prone to perfectionism. And that's a big area that we looked at, in switching that mindset from that inner critic that is ever present.
That was a really interesting session we did, didn't we?
And moving that to being more the observer, and then that creative communicator on stage. That was great to see. But it was interesting when we did that, or when those are the key components you brought into it, particularly the inner critic, which I really enjoyed that session as you entwined it in. But it was interesting how all the different, because we're looking at the uniqueness of the individual or of that student, and they were recognising themselves, how some were overly critical about themselves and others were not as critical. And it was that kind of the nuances that they were gathering from merging the programmes together. I found that really interesting. Another area I found particularly interesting, in which we developed for our second pilot programme was the idea of the natural self and the adapted self.
Yes.
And I can think of specific students who, for them, this was a light bulb moment. And they changed the way they performed. They realised they had been performing in an adapted fashion. And the moment they stepped into their natural self to perform, it took off. So that was fantastic.
But linking that in with the 4 rooms, that's why the whole framework was really coming to life here, because they were recognising all those key components. And I think that was the other thing that excited me. We actually gave them the framework, and they were actually drawing the bits together and making it work for themselves. I think that was pretty incredible. But I do agree with you with what we learned from the first time we did it, and then what we then added to the second just made the second so much stronger.
And you talk about drawing strands together and seeing students do that. Do you want to say a little bit about the effect of life events on people in general, but musicians specifically?
Yeah, I mean, particularly, again, the whole roundabout theory, and this is about the life events, and this is an idea that was invented or created by Dr. Paul Coulter. He's a physician and a doctor, and now a professor at Birmingham City University. And he came up with this theory that when we're looking at our life events going through, however old we are, that we hit an event, and if we have that self-understanding, or if we don't have that self-understanding, all we want to do is get off at exit 2. If you imagine that as a roundabout. But because we don't have the self-understanding, we don't have the skill sets, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the skills, we don't always have the attitude and not necessarily the behaviour to get over on exit 2. And suddenly we go off at exit 1, or we get off at exit 3, or we go off at exit 4 and go back the way we came. Or that event puts us on this roundabout and we're spinning around and around and around. And that's something that we teach very much on the MSc, but of course we brought that into the Conservatoire programme as a key component of the whole framework. And what we found with some of these students, they were joining the dots themselves and recognising that now they had that self-understanding. They recognised that what they perceived was a roundabout, and it was a negative roundabout, and they were spinning on that roundabout, and spinning on that roundabout meant that they were not in their 4 rooms, and because they weren't in their 4 rooms, they were unable to perform to the level that they could. And when we actually were able to help them smash those roundabouts, they were still there. They could look at them and say, it's not like it just suddenly went, but I now understand it. I understand the other people involved, or the other person involved, and perhaps actually it was not all my fault. They were able not to either be spinning on it or going backwards and coming back. They found their own way through on exit 2. And that was very exciting to see, because obviously I've been used to seeing this when we're taking students through a detailed level 7 MSc module. But to actually take these core components and break it down into, what did we do them, Katharine, 6 3-hour sessions or 2-hour sessions, something?
So our first pilot programme is 6 3-hour sessions, and then we refined that to be less in length for online sessions. Yes, we did shorter online sessions in the second programme.
But we put more substance in it, didn't we? We just learned from it. And I think that was very exciting, how they embraced this knowledge, but it all linked about them increasing their understanding. And the big message of the framework is that recognition of how unique you are as an individual. Yeah. That was quite exciting.
So in our questionnaire, it was a brilliant outcome for me to see that 100% of all students involved in the second pilot programme felt that they had higher levels of confidence and resilience having attended the programme. Yeah. They had greater self-understanding. Again, 100% of students felt they had greater understanding. And one highlight for them was having the one-to-one sessions with you and I, to be able to unpick any residual particular issues that they might have had. And you talk about roundabouts, and for musicians, this can hold us back. A musical experience in our youth, a performance that didn't go well, for example, in the past, and to be able to look at that feedback they might have received that they felt was unfair, or teachers that might not have understood their student and therefore were not helping them in the best way. These sorts of individual issues, I think, our students found that as a really valuable part of the programme.
I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think the other thing that we were able to help them to recognise that in some cases they were seeing themselves as the victim, and they were just, this person did this to me. And what this broke, it actually broke, coming back to smashing negative roundabouts, it gave them the exit on they got onto exit 2 and got off the roundabout, and they were realising that wasn't even the intention of the other person. Now that they understood themselves and they understood others, and they recognised that all 7.8 billion people are looking at the world somewhat differently, they recognised that wasn't their intention. They didn't intend to do this or say that, whatever. And I think that was huge, absolutely huge, when we drew the whole framework into it.
And the final outcome for me that was lovely to see. So one element in the course we're looking at is, why have you chosen music?
Yeah.
You know, what is your meaning and purpose about being a musician? And I felt very strongly that to survive in the professional world as a musician, to go through this rigorous training, to feel motivated to practice for all the hours a day you need to be at the top of your game, you have to be sure it's what you want to do. You can't be left with any residual doubts. And if you have doubts, and if there's something else you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But we need to look at that. We need to be sure that we have identified for ourselves what music means to us and what purpose music has for us in our lives. And in giving the opportunity to our students to do that, there were a couple of students particularly for whom this was quite life-affirming and life-changing, to make sure they're absolutely on this path.
Well, that really is so relevant, isn't it? Because we had a student right in the middle of COVID doubting whether or not being at the Conservatoire, whether or not his life of music was for him. And he had actually gone down the path of leaving music altogether and going into another career. And his feedback was, because of this course, because of what he had understood about himself, he was actually able, and because we have a decision-making process, how to make decisions, he used all of that, absolutely used it, and turned around and fed back. This program enabled me to objectively review who I am, what I am, and he turned down a very high-paying job to stay at the Conservatoire and dedicate his life to what he loves. And he realised, I wouldn't have been able to do this. I wouldn't have made the right decision for me. I would have made a decision that would have become a roundabout in the future, and I would have been going through my life saying, why did I do that? I'm not happy anymore. I'm not happy. And that, I think that was quite joyous, hearing that. That was quite amazing. Now it's about taking it to the next stage, which is really making this open to all Conservatoire students in a much more accessible way. And also, it brings us into where we're going with the Healthy Conservatoires network, which probably is easy if you bring us up to speed with that. Okay, so on the as we've been developing our two programmes over this pilot period, if you like, we were invited by Shirley Thompson, the interim principal at Royal Birmingham Conservatoire, to put together a case study and to see if this would be accepted by the Healthy Conservatoires network. And we've done that, and it has been accepted. So the case study is live now on the Healthy Conservatoires network. And it's a great organisation because this is specifically looking at areas of health and well-being across all conservatoires, and making sure we have this focus
on the needs of our students and promoting and encouraging all areas of new research and exciting programmes that are happening in the different conservatoires.
I was also interested in the similarities and the way the Healthy Conservatoires Network work, and they've expanded upon the 4 rooms and they've gone into more components with that, albeit that's not something we're going to do, but it was interesting that they were looking at it from a true health perspective. So I thought that was really
and it's great to have, we've made this collaboration between the Conservatoire and our health education and life science faculty in what we've been doing, and it's also to participate in wider collaboration.
Exactly.
And that's what the Healthy Conservatoires Network stands for, really.
I think, yeah, and as an international organisation, that is actually going to give an opportunity for the way that this information, what we've created here, can be shared amongst a wider group of up-and-coming musicians.
Yeah.